Holy One, speak to us today. And may we have ears to hear. Amen. Please be seated. In case you're ever on Jeopardy, you should know that there's several different versions of this story in the scriptures, and in none of them is it Mary Magdalene. In this particular version that we heard today, it's Mary of Bethany, Lazarus' sister. And the version that our hymn that we just sang is referencing to is in Matthew and Mark. In that version, the woman is never named. It all began when a pope in like the 600 or so preached a sermon where he mistook Mary Magdalene for Mary of Bethany, and then conflated that with the other versions in Matthew and Mark, where the writers say a woman who had been a sinful woman, and he started this rumor somehow that Mary Magdalene was a prostitute, and neither of those are true. She wasn't even in this story. So now you know if you're on Jeopardy. This week I have been thinking about smells. I was hoping you would laugh because hearing about our plumbing mishap earlier in the week, of course I've been thinking about smells, but our reading has a much pleasanter story about smells. Smell is our sense that is most connected to memory. Most of us can summon a vivid memory based on certain smells. Like bread baking might remind you of your grandmother, or the smell of cut grass might remind you of spending time with your dad doing yard work. For me, I always will associate the smell of rosemary with Jerusalem, because when my pilgrimage group in January of 2020 was walking the Via Dolorosa, so the Way of Sorrow, from the Mount of Olives all the way to Church of the Holy Sepulchre, that is called the Way of Sorrow because most likely it's a similar path that Jesus walked to get to Golgotha, to carry his cross along the way. So appropriately named, the Way of Sorrow. And our pilgrim leaders gave us two things to carry, a sprig of rosemary and a small olive wood cross. So as I'm walking this path, periodically I would smell the rosemary, and now that is so ingrained in my mind that every time I smell rosemary, I will think of walking that way of sorrow. This week I've also been thinking about money. How much will insurance pay versus how much will repairs cost? Many of you might have spent your week thinking about money, wondering how your retirement accounts are going to do after the strange week in the stock market. It's been a stressful week for those paying attention. And today's gospel story speaks to those two things, smell and money. Mary's gift is almost unfathomably generous. Perfume in Jesus' time was a lavish thing, something only the very wealthy could afford. The siblings of Bethany, Lazarus, Martha, and Mary, were some of Jesus' closest friends, and they were most likely a fairly wealthy family that helped finance Jesus' ministry and support him and the disciples when they're living this nomadic lifestyle, going from village to village to preach and minister. And this particular dinner party that we just read about is especially celebratory. In the preceding chapter of John, Lazarus died. And it occurs to me that scent was mentioned in that story too. When Jesus asked them to roll away the stone blocking Lazarus' tomb, Martha, ever practical Martha, says, "Lord, my brother has been dead already 4 days. There will be a smell." As we know, Jesus arrived several days too late. So Lazarus' sisters, Mary and Martha, both greet him with heartbreaking expressions of grief. They both say the exact same thing when they see Jesus at separate times. Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. I picture Martha saying it with her kind of stoic grief. She probably feels like she has to be the strong one now, so she's holding it together. But Mary is much more emotional. She throws herself at Jesus' feet and weeps. Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. And Jesus is so moved that we get the shortest Bible verse. Jesus wept. Shortly thereafter, Jesus works his miracle and raises Lazarus from the dead. And in John's Gospel, which we've just read, it's this miracle that leads the powers that be to decide that Jesus is too dangerous to live. Once they hear that he's brought a man back to life, they decide he is too powerful and start plotting to kill him. So by giving Lazarus back his life, Jesus has in effect sealed his own death. In the very next chapter, after this miraculous story of resurrection, the siblings are throwing a dinner in Jesus' honor, probably in gratitude and celebration that Lazarus is back. And during the dinner, Mary brings out her perfume. John tells us that the pint of pure nard was worth 300 denarii, or about a year's wages. So I did some digging to try to understand what does that mean in today's dollars. Some sources estimated this perfume to be worth around $25,000, and that was the low end. Others estimated over $50,000. And as we're thinking about money and Mary and Judas, it occurred to me, Judas accepted 30 silver coins to betray Jesus. Now, it's hard to estimate what the spending power of those coins might be comparably in today's dollars, but the actual silver content in the coins, we can probably guess, depending on the type of coin. And probably that silver in today's dollars would only be worth $300 to $500. So you think about the two. Mary was willing to spend maybe 100 times as much money on this momentary act of devotion and worship and gratitude than Judas was willing to accept to betray Jesus. But after all, how much money is a beloved brother's life worth? Probably much more, Mary would have told us. Her extravagant act of worship makes so much sense when we remember that her brother has just had his life returned to him. There's beautiful symbolism here. Before, she's weeping at Jesus' feet. Now she is worshiping at his feet, washing those feet with priceless perfume. And what a dramatic change in smell. The smell of the tomb washed away from their memory with the smell of this pure nard. Now you might say, Hilary, that's all well and good, but didn't Judas kind of have a point when he said this perfume could have been sold and the money given to the poor? And if that thought crossed your mind, no, you're not alone. People have puzzled over this for many years. But John doesn't want us to side with Judas, obviously. He tells us Judas has been stealing. And so it's not coming from some sort of altruistic desire to help the poor, but because he wanted to be able to steal some of that money. But Jesus' reply is a little weird. He says, "Leave Mary alone. She bought this perfume so she might keep it for the day of my burial. You always have the poor with you, but you do not always have me." And over the centuries, some people have actually used these words to argue that nothing should be done to help poor people, which I think would probably flabbergast Jesus. On the surface, without context, you might think he sounds a little flippant or pessimistic or even selfish, but his audience, especially those who had spent a lot of time studying the scriptures, would know better. They would know that he's referencing Deuteronomy 15:11. For the poor will never cease to be in the land. Therefore I command you, you shall freely open your hand to your brother, to your needy and poor in your land. Jesus treats caring for the poor as a given, as something we will all do all the time. And he assumes that his disciples will always be doing this all of the time. And when he says, you won't always have me, he's trying to remind them yet again that he is about to die. He's been trying to get them to understand this, and they keep not believing him. He's about to walk that Via Dolorosa, the way of sorrow. His time is running out, and Mary appears to be one of the few who's taking him seriously. She washes his feet with this costly perfume, knowing she could use whatever was left to bless his body after his death. And I think this moment had a profound effect on Jesus. You know, scent is so attached to memory, and there's something really intimate and humble about another person washing your feet. If you've ever had this done at a Maundy Thursday service, you'll know it's very meaningful. It's very intimate, very humbling. At a Maundy Thursday service in 2022, when I was very tired after what felt like many years, and only been 2 years of pandemic hospital ministry, I was serving at a Maundy Thursday service at St. Luke's in Ballard, and my mentor, the Reverend Britt Olson, who some of you got to meet, we always like to model, the clergy like to model the washing of feet for folks who maybe have never done it before. And so I washed her feet, and then we changed places, and she starts to wash my feet. And normally it's kind of a silent exercise, you know, it's really reflective. There's probably some soft music playing. And after she finished washing her feet, Britt reached up and grabbed my hands. It startled me a little bit. And so I looked down at her, and she's looking up at me with this really profound eye contact and says, Hilary, thank you. Thank you for everything you've done in the hospital. You have been through so much. Thank you. And I cried like a baby. And I thought, why didn't we face these chairs the other way? The live stream is right on me. But I never forgot that moment. I never will. So I have to imagine it was the same for Jesus. He's probably a little startled. Mary is interrupting this celebratory meal to do this demonstration of devotion with this perfume. I bet she reached up to grab his hands to say, thank you for giving my brother back. Thank you for everything you are going to suffer for us. In fact, I think we can safely assume this moment had a profound effect on Jesus, because in the very next chapter, he gathers with his disciples in the upper room for that last Passover meal, takes a towel and a bowl, and washes each of their feet one by one. So I wonder if Mary inspired him to do that. If she did, she has changed the world forever, had an indelible impact on our own worship, our own practices. The stole that ministers wear is meant to be a reference to the towel Jesus put around his neck when he washed the disciples' feet. So maybe we can track that moment all the way back to Mary, washing Jesus' feet with that perfume. Maybe when he washed his disciples' feet, Jesus reached up to grab their hands to say thank you. Thank you for coming with me this far. Thank you for the things you will suffer when I'm gone. Thank you for being my friend. Mary's extravagant gift, washing Jesus' feet with that perfume, is a gift that's so beautiful in the moment, but yet gone in the next. Once that perfume was poured out, that's it. Once the smell had faded from the room, it was gone. But that act of serving Jesus, of caring for him, tending to him, think about how wounded and calloused a nomad's feet would be to tend to those feet. That moment appears to have impacted Jesus forever, and in turn, through Jesus, impacted the world. So my friends, remember, the gifts that you give to each other, to this church, to people in need, those gifts may sometimes seem like they're beautiful in the moment and then gone. But we have seen, thanks to Mary's example, the impact a gift, an act of service can do. Let me assure you, the people that you help, who are impacted by the gifts that you give, whether they are gifts of your time, of your skill, or of money, those people will remember your gift for the care it showed them, for the love it showed them, and for how it made them feel long after the impact of that gift is gone. So let us remember to be like Mary. Give generously and with extravagant love. Because we have seen what the impact of one powerful gift can be. You may think it's beautiful and gone in the next moment, but you may change somebody else's world forever. So let us follow her example. Amen.